All right, everybody, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive, and let me tell you, this one is a doozy. We're talking about the Holy Grail, but we're not just talking about some cup, right? Like, this thing is supposed to be the key to eternal life, a weapon of unimaginable power, maybe even proof of a secret bloodline. We're going to try to separate fact from fiction by going straight to the source excerpts from The Search for the Holy Grail, The Sacred Chalice of Christ. And trust me, when I say this deep dive has it all. From ancient Celtic myths to Nazi traitor hunters to seriously hardcore medieval knights.
We're talking about a legend that has captured imaginations for centuries, and when you really start to peel back the layers, you realize it's a story about power belief and the very human need to find meaning in the world around us.
Yeah, no kidding. So to kick things off, let's rewind the clock back to post-World War I Germany. You've got a nation trying to rebuild itself, licking its wounds from defeat and searching for anything to reignite that sense of national pride.
Enter Adolf Hitler, a charismatic leader who promises to restore Germany to its former glory. And of course, we know how that story goes.
Yeah, not exactly a lighthearted chapter in history. But there's another player in this whole thing, Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS. And let me tell you, this guy was all about the occult, believed it held the key to proving Aryan supremacy and, achieving the whole world domination thing. And this is where it gets really interesting, too. Himmler becomes obsessed with finding the Holy Grail, convinced that it would give him some kind of ultimate power. I mean, think about it, a relic tied to Jesus Christ himself. The propaganda value alone would be off the charts, right?
Absolutely. And that's precisely why he recruited a scholar named Otto Rahn, an expert on Grail lore, to track it down for him.
Okay, so we've got a Nazi leader obsessed with the occult, a scholar who may or may not be in over his head, and the Holy Grail up for grabs. This is already shaping up to be one wild ride. But here's the thing. Rahn knew that the Grail's origins were rooted in medieval literature, not necessarily historical fact. So how do you reconcile those two things?
Well, you have to remember, the Nazis were masters of manipulating information, twisting narratives to fit their ideology. Historical accuracy wasn't their top priority. They were in the business of crafting a narrative, a myth, if you will, that served their ultimate goal.
And in this case, that myth revolved around the Holy Grail, a symbol so potent, so deeply embedded in Western consciousness that it could be used to justify almost anything. It's a chilling reminder that history can be a dangerous weapon, especially when it's rewritten by those in power. So we have Roned, this scholar stuck between a rock and a hard place, tasked with finding an object that might not even exist, all while under the watchful eye of the SS. Talk about pressure. So what does he do? He turns to the rich world of Celtic mythology, a world filled with stories of magical cauldrons that grant immortality wells overflowing with ancient wisdom. You know, the kind of stuff that makes you question everything you thought you knew about history.
And this is where we start to see the Grail's evolution, from a simple object to a symbol imbued with all sorts of meaning and power, right? It's not just about finding a cup anymore. It's about tapping into something ancient, something primal, something that speaks to our deepest desires and fears.
Exactly. These myths, while fantastical, offer a glimpse into humanity's timeless fascination with the supernatural, a longing for knowledge, power, and perhaps even a way to transcend death itself. Themes that echo throughout the Grail's evolution and help us understand its enduring appeal.
Okay, so we've got Celtic myths, Nazi treasure hunters, but wait, there's more. The story of the Holy Grail doesn't end there. In fact, it's about to get a whole lot more interesting. Last time we left off with the Grail taking a serious detour into the realm of Celtic lore, but things are about to get even wilder. Trust me. So we've got Otto Rahn, remember him? The scholar roped into working for the Nazis. Well, his research takes him down a fascinating path, and he stumbles upon a group known as the Cathars.
The Cathars were a religious sect that emerged in 12th century France, and they weren't exactly best buds with the Catholic Church. Yeah, they were kind of like the free thinkers of their time, right? Questioning traditional doctrines and ruffling a lot of feathers within the established order.
Precisely. And one of the things that made them particularly intriguing was this rumor that they possessed the Holy Grail. Imagine that.
Oh, man, talk about adding fuel to the fire, right? Like, here's this group already challenging the norm, and on top of that, they might have one of the most sought-after relics in history.
Exactly. It made them both alluring and incredibly dangerous, especially in the eyes of the church, which ultimately led to their downfall.
Yeah, sadly, the Cathar story doesn't exactly have a happy ending. Their last stand took place at a fortress called Montségur in 1244. This fortress, perched high in the French Pyrenees, was like their Alamo.
Right? It was a siege for the ages. The Cathars held out against the forces of the church for months, but eventually Montségur fell.
And here's where the legend kicks in right before the fortress fell. A small group of Cathars supposedly escaped into the night, carrying with them the sect's most treasured possessions, including some believe the Holy Grail itself.
It's a tale that has sparked countless treasure hunts and fueled speculation for centuries.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up. But here's where Ron's research takes an interesting turn. He's not entirely convinced that the Grail was smuggled out of Montségur.
Remember, Ron's working under immense pressure to deliver something tangible to the Nazis, so he has to tread carefully. He's a scholar at heart, but he's also navigating a dangerous political landscape.
Yeah, talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place. So what does he do? He starts piecing together this intricate puzzle using Celtic myths, medieval poems, and Cathar legends, and he comes up with a new theory about the Grail's whereabouts.
He suggests that the Grail might be hidden not at Montségur, but at the Montserrat Monastery in Spain, a place steeped in its own history and legends.
It's a bold move, right? Like, he's basically throwing the Nazis a bone, but he's also cleverly weaving his research into the mix.
Exactly. And it works. Himmler completely buys into Ron's theory, and he's so convinced that the Grail is hidden in Montserrat that he decides to go after it himself.
Wait a minute, the head of the SS goes on a personal treasure hunt. That's too good to be true.
Oh, it's true. All right. Himmler travels to Spain in 1940, fully expecting to waltz into Montserrat and claim the Grail for the Third Reich. But there's just one small problem.
Oh, I'm sensing a plot twist here.
Yeah.
Let me guess. The monks at Montserrat weren't exactly thrilled to have a Nazi delegation show up on their doorstep demanding ancient relics.
You got it. The abbot of Montserrat flat out refuses to cooperate with Himmler. No matter how much pressure he exerts, the monks stand firm.
Yeah.
The Grail, if it's even there, remains hidden.
Wow. So Himmler's grand expedition to Spain ends not with a triumphant discovery of the Grail, but with a big fat dose of rejection.
It's almost comical when you think about it. The Nazis, this regime obsessed with power and control, ultimately thwarted by a bunch of monks.
It just goes to show that history is full of surprises. But while the Nazi quest for the Grail might have fizzled out, the search for this elusive relic was far from over.
In the decades that followed, a new wave of interest in the Grail emerged, fueled by advancements in archaeology and a renewed fascination with medieval history and lore.
And this brings us to one of the most intriguing contenders in the Grail story, the Valencia Chalice. Okay, so last time we were talking about this elusive Grail, right? And up to now, it's all myths and legends and Nazis, but now we're going to get into some real-deal history with the Valencia Chalice.
This is where things get really interesting because the Valencia Chalice is like a real-life artifact, right? It's right there in a cathedral in Spain. You can go see it.
But what makes it the Holy Grail? Is it just because it's old and looks fancy?
Well, it's not quite that simple. The Valencia Chalice is actually two parts. You have this ancient agate cup, which some believe dates back to the time of Christ. And then there's this elaborate base made of gold and jewels that was added much later, probably around the 14th century.
So they just jazzed up a simple cup and called it the Holy Grail?
Not exactly. You see the embellishment, the golds, the pearls, the precious stones. It all points to how the cup's significance evolved over time.
So it's kind of like a historical glow-up.
You could say that.
Yeah.
But what's really intriguing is the research that went into tracing the origins of that agate cup. Remember, we're talking about the top part, not the fancy base.
Right. So where did it come from? How did it end up in a Spanish cathedral?
Well, according to historical records and a fair bit of speculation, it's believed that the cup traveled from Jerusalem to Rome with St. Peter.
Wow. Talk about frequent flyer miles.
Right. And then during a period of persecution against Christians, it was supposedly smuggled out of Rome to Spain by San Lorenzo.
This is like an Indiana Jones movie, just without the whip and the fedora.
And the story doesn't end there. The cup eventually ends up in a monastery in Spain around the 12th century, and then in a twist of fate, it's used as collateral for a king's loan.
Wait a minute. So the Holy Grail was once a pawn in a royal debt? That's wild.
And here's the kicker. The loan was never repaid. So technically, the Valencia Chalice still belongs to the descendants of that lender.
You're kidding me. That's insane. So even if it's not the actual cup used by Jesus at the Last Supper, the Valencia Chalice has one heck of a backstory.
Absolutely. It's a tangible link to history, a testament to the power of belief and the enduring fascination with the Holy Grail. But just when you thought the Grail couldn't get any more interesting, a new theory emerges.
Oh boy, what now?
In 1982, 3 authors, Bajent Lee and Lincoln, published a book called The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. And let me tell you, this book blew the lid off everything people thought they knew about the Grail.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hit me with it.
Their central claim was that the Holy Grail wasn't an object at all. It wasn't a cup or a stone or anything like that. They said it was a metaphor
A metaphor for what?
for sang royal, which means royal blood. In other words, they were talking about a bloodline.
Hold on, you're saying the Holy Grail is a person?
Not just any person. They claim that Jesus and Mary Magdalene had a child, and that this child carried on Jesus's bloodline, and that the Holy Grail was a metaphor for this secret lineage.
Wow, okay. That is a serious plot twist. So what happened to this bloodline? Did it just disappear?
According to the authors, no. This bloodline continued down through history. They even claim that a secret society known as the Priory of Sion was formed to protect it.
The Priory of Sion sounds like something out of a Dan Brown novel.
Right. The authors made it sound like this incredibly powerful and secretive organization pulling the strings from the shadows, protecting the descendants of Jesus.
Okay, so we've gone from Nazi treasure hunters to a secret society protecting the bloodline of Christ.
My head is spinning.
It's a lot to take in. And while the book was a massive bestseller and sparked a ton of debate, it wasn't without its critics.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, it all sounds a little too good to be true.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of the claims made in the book have been debunked over the years. For example, those ancient documents they cited as proof of the Priory of Sion. Well, they turned out to be forgeries.
Oh, no. Really? So this whole Priory of Sion thing was a hoax? Pretty much. But here's the thing. Even though the book's central claims have been largely discredited, it still had a huge impact on popular culture.
That's the thing about conspiracy theories, right? Once they take root, they're hard to shake.
Exactly. But even if we dismiss the more outlandish claims of the book, it does raise some interesting questions about the nature of belief, the power of storytelling, and the enduring allure of the Holy Grail.
It's like we're hardwired to seek out these grand narratives, these mysteries that connect us to something bigger than ourselves.
And the Holy Grail, it's the ultimate symbol of that. It represents our deepest longings, our search for meaning, our desire to believe in something extraordinary.
So even if it's not a literal cup or a bloodline or a magical artifact, the idea of the Holy Grail still holds power.
Exactly. It's a mirror reflecting back our own hopes and dreams, our need to find something worth searching for.
Well said. Well, folks, there you have it. The Holy Grail. From ancient myths to Nazi obsessions to modern-day conspiracy theories, it's a story that continues to captivate and inspire. Who knows what secrets are still out there waiting to be uncovered?
That's the beauty of it. There's always more to discover. So keep asking questions, keep exploring, and maybe, just maybe, you'll find your own Holy Grail.
And that's a wrap on another deep dive. Catch you all next time.